I grew up in Limerick City, Ireland, which back then Limerick was the oldest city in the country, as you probably know. And at that time of my boyhood, population would have been around 40,000, maybe 45 at best. Um, I was born in 1932, which would have been only 10 years after the War of Independence. My father was one of the original freedom fighters of the uprising, the rebellion, revolution, more accurately called, of 1916. Very strong political views, and from the time of that I knew him until his death, he was a strong believer in Irish freedom for the entire country. And of course, various nuances took place down the years that there were things happening towards making that. So I grew up in what you would call a patriotic, what we would refer to as Republican family. We weren't fanatical. We didn't know much about at all that happened at the northern end of the country in what I would now refer to as the occupied zone. My father would have been a devoted follower of the then government, what they called the Fianna Fáil. On the other hand, on my grandfather's side, who had been Protestant in their upbringing and everything else, they would have been the other side in the Civil War and everything else. So I had a very healthy balance of the two sides of the coin, and I loved my grandfather as dearly in many ways as my father, although their politics were diametrically opposed. So it was interesting, which taught me at a very early age how to handle the naive American who would say, "Oh, don't you Protestants and Catholics fight with each other all the time?" I said, "No, I loved my Protestant aunt and my cousins, so forth, and we grew up in harmony." And my Protestant uncle, married through marriage, was as patriotic, I would say, as my father was. So, and then Ireland of my day, my father was a carpenter, and through a little bit political clout that he had, got himself a decent job as a manager or a foreman in the railroad area. He was a coach builder by trade and a finished carpenter. Simple man, not formally educated, but extremely well read. The British of his day didn't give the Irish much of a chance for education, so we had the hedge school and self-educators, which to me was true education, not like just exposing yourself to a college professor, taking notes and memorizing something and calling yourself educated. Well, I don't consider that education. It's like getting a suntan that'll be gone when the sun fades away. Okay, my mother was a regular housewife all her life. My mother came from a more, to use an Irish term, a higher state in higher social state of life. And it was like a step down to marry a carpenter type of thing. But that was never a big issue, great with them. My mother and father loved each very much. There were 7 children, 2 who died at birth, and then 5 more after she was told she could have had no more children. She had 5 more children. I've been in the middle of them. We grew up first of all, in a strictly tenement house. I wouldn't say we were not impoverished. We certainly were not rich. We weren't middle class. We were strictly working class poor. Enough to go round, but nothing extra whatever. We lived in a 1-room tenement for the first 6 or 7 years of my life. 1 room. Where you had to go outside the room, down 2 or 3 flights of stairs, big old Georgian house, to get water from a tap on the outside. And there was no inside plumbing or anything like that, no inside toilets. I can leave the rest to your imagination. And I look back with fierce pride. I come from the Ireland of, I'm not familiar if you're familiar with Angela's Ashes. I'm from the Ireland of Angela's Ashes, written by Frank McCord, about the poverty of the country. A poverty, shall I say, not because we were indolent, not because we were lazy, but because of the oppression and deprivation foisted upon us by foreign forces. We weren't, as I said, I was born a post-war child. And the first constitution of the country was written in around my time of birth, 1932. And so, at the particular time, I had a normal childhood in Ireland, typical every Irish child of my generation would have gone 5 years to school in, I guess, what would you call it here, the young, from kindergarten, we didn't call it that. A child in Ireland started school at 4 or 3.5. Started learning their ABCs. They spent 5 years in that type of environment. Then after that, they would go for another 5 years into what they called primary school. Then they would go from primary into secondary, which would be another 5 years. The first would be with, I know the Lord will forgive me, but the Merciless Sisters of Mercy. And the second period would be with the Christian Brothers, the Irish Christian Brothers. What was ever very Christian about them, I'll never know. Because they literally beat you up, beat the knowledge into you, if you let them, that was. Now you had sharp kids like myself, who never given an opportunity to put a finger on us, because we outsmarted them. So I went through a normal upbringing like that in a working class family. Now, of course, the Irish who have look over their glasses and their noses in the air don't often forget that we come from a thatched cottage, and they forget how much credit is due to the very hard working, down to earth working class parent, whether they came from Ireland or Germany or Italy. They were the salt of the earth. They made sacrifices way beyond the call of their state of life to give everything that they didn't have to their children. So I'm very fiercely proud of that particular tradition.